Hey there everybody, Eric from Outer Limitless coming at you today on Outer Limitless Blades with a couple of knives from Skallywag Tactical. Now I saw these guys for the first time at Blade Show, didn't know too much about them. Recently at SHOT Show, started getting sort of involved with tour knives and then realized that the two companies are kind of like sister companies. So if you've seen tour knives or if you've seen Skallywag, at this point there is some DNA between the two brands, so that's really cool. And the knives we're going to look at fall into a couple of different lines. So first off, this is the Fireside Pro, and you can see here that it does look very similar to some of the construction we've taken a look at in the past with tour knives, and specifically here, this is the Allied Brawler, which I previously covered on this channel. But as you take a look at these, very similar in terms of the construction, and we'll talk about that in some detail. But before we do that, we are going to take a look at this knife here. This is the Wanderer. And the first thing I'm going to say, and I'm really only going to break out this negative point one time, and then I'm going to leave it alone and not come back to it. But look how honking this packaging is for the given size of the knife. And the first thing I'm going to say about that, and the reason why it matters to me, it shouldn't matter at all to me, but it does from the standpoint that in the grand scheme of the world, because the packaging is inefficient in size, it's going to mean that this company needs to maintain larger storage space, which costs more money. It's going to cost more to ship this knife, which is going to cost more money. It's going to cost more to produce the package, at least I would have to think so. So the only thing I'm going to say that I find to be a true negative is the size of the package, and that's being nitpicky, but I think it's an important point at the same time. But it's nicely packaged, there's no denying that. It's actually a pretty cool box. Has that little pull tab on the end. Nice form fit in terms of the foam on the inside. So presentation-wise, that's pretty cool. And then the knife here itself, you can see tan with the leather. Now, the leather has some white on it, and that will rub off. A lot of times leather does end up with, kind of, I don't know exactly what it is about the leather. I'll look up the name of it, but leather oftentimes will kind of put off that whitish powder or residue. So it is here in that case, but not a big deal. And that will easily buff out with a microfiber. Very simple. So again, my point is that's not a big deal. Comes with a ferro rod loop, so that's cool. And the knife itself, the Wanderer. Now, a couple of different colorways here. You can get this in the tan, which I do like. You can also get this in black, and you can get it in green. As you take a look at the blade profile, it has a really, I would say, just like bushcrafty inspired shape, which I like. It's about a 50% saber grind. It is not a Scandi grind, but it's Scandi-esque just from the standpoint that it's kind of got that traditional bushcraft look, and if this was a Scandi, I wouldn't be surprised. But clearly, it's a saber grind with a secondary bevel. If you look at that secondary bevel, looks to be pretty nicely done. Nice and even from the tip all the way to the back of the blade towards that ricasso with a sharpening choil. And as I feel the edge, very sharp and refined right out of the box. So I think this is going to be a fantastic slicer and should have excellent overall performance. And what I do like is this comes in 154 cm, and I've always been a fan of 154 cm. I do like that steel from the standpoint that, of course, it has excellent stainless properties, fantastic edge retention overall, but it's also easy to sharpen. Now, I'm not going to say it has the best edge retention, but when you get a reasonable toothy edge, which this does come with a toothy edge, I like that. And it just has a nice slicing capability. I really do think this is going to be an excellent slicer. It feels like it right away. Fairly thin edge, and if you look at the stock thickness here, Skallywag saying this is 3/16 of an inch, but I'm going to put my calipers on it. Which, as I get on this here, this says basically 0.145. So if we call that 0.15, that's 5/30 seconds, which to me is the sweet spot. So it's definitely much thinner. So it is definitely much thinner than the 3/16, but I think that's a good thing and will aid in the overall performance of this knife. I have personally used 5/30 seconds on a number of my designs intentionally to find that sweet spot between a robust knife that's going to be thick enough for the harder tasks like batoning and splitting wood, yet thin enough that it's really going to be an excellent slicer by the time you get to the back edge of that secondary bevel. And I do expect that's exactly what we're going to see here with the Wanderer. So I'm a big fan of that stock thickness. The overall length, right over 9¼ inches, so kind of between 9¼ and 9½. The overall blade length, 4.75 inches, but we have about 4¼ inches of the actual cutting edge. The handle here, you can see, nicely contoured and rounded. Now, there's not much in the way of a palm swell. These are more slab-sided, but the way they've contoured and rounded everything on all of the edges does work out well for a comfortable grip, and you can see this fills out my hands nicely. Skallywag reporting that the overall handle length being 4.75 inches, I would say it's closer to 4.5. So if you have a large size hand, which I do, or even extra large, you should fit this handle nicely. You can see getting that sort of hammer grip there. There's plenty of room all the way to the back. A little bit of that bird's beak, which will help you index if you get back. And you can see just spanning my hand, opening it up, getting some comfort, and then thumb over the top. That will work just fine. And as I do get my thumb over the top, the spine is greatly sharpened 90 degree. So where your thumb is, it's going to be fine. It's not going to beat you up. It's not going to cut you. But what this does is gives you that excellent 90 degree spine so you can scrape some fuzz, get yourself, some tinder, which is really important for fire prep, and then also ripping on a ferro rod. This should do just fine. That spine is nice and square, even though it is coated. Now, 154 cm should not necessarily need a coating, but you can see Skallywag opted to go with the black PVD coating. It is very even. Looks like it should hold up pretty well. We'll see in testing. For me personally, I don't like a lot of coatings anymore. I just prefer my naked blades and I treat them the way you need to. 154, you certainly would be able to. However, I'll give it this. It looks way more badass having the coating. It looks way more badass matching in with the screws, especially against the tan, which I do like. And the fact that the tang of the knife here, nice, dark all the way through. This is a great looking knife. Strikes the balance between a kind of tactical look, but really more of that bushcraft look, which I think is what they were going for, if I had to guess. And the reason why I say that is because you pair it up now with the leather sheath and give it the ferro rod. This is absolutely screaming bushcraft. Now, in terms of the quality of the leather, seems to be reasonable. It's not too thin. It's not too thick. Has a snap here, which for me, I'm a big fan of really more of a deep ride, or I should say like a deep set sort of pouch style sheath. I'm not a big fan of straps on my bushcraft knives because you can certainly cut through that strap, and it's real easy to do so with a knife like this. And especially if you're, deep in the wilderness or trusting your tool, I will always, unsnap this and then flick it around underneath, kind of all the way underneath, and get my hands completely clear of that blade so that two things. One, I'm not going to accidentally cut through that strap, but more importantly, not accidentally cut my fingers. Now, just a couple last details here. Obviously, this is kind of a spear point design, so, heavy drop, spear point design. The blade hardness, so 154 cm with a Rockwell hardness of 59 to 62 HRC. They are saying this weighs in at 7.5 ounces, so not incredibly heavy, and just real nice size, great belt knife, awesome camp companion. I think this knife is really going to perform well, and I can't wait to get it out into the field. Now the Wanderer having a different OEM than the Fireside Pro. So the Fireside Pro here, again, manufactured by Tour. Just a real cool little blade. Now this is in 440C. So that's a steel that, some people like it, some people don't. I don't have any problem with any steel as long as it's heat treated well and it performs. And for the price point, very reasonable with the Fireside Pro. At least in terms of the specifications. But when you read the body of the write-up on this particular knife, it says it's in 420. I would be surprised if they're using 420 stainless versus 440C. Hard to say. And I will try to get some clarification and annotate below. And I didn't catch that detail until now. Kind of wish I knew a little bit earlier on, but it just is what it is. Now this handle color, G10, but you can see here the awesome red and blue liners with that light gray, almost white G10 on the side, 3D machined, and this is the color they call Freedom. So there have been some Tour knives with the Freedom handle colors, and in this particular case, Skallywag doing it here. It's just real cool, a neat look, and I definitely like it. Now, as you take a look at the blades on the side of the stock, you can see it has that hammered look. Definitely neat. The PVD coating, which again, for me, take it or leave it. I'd rather leave it, but it does look good. I can't deny, that these knives look fantastic. And matching in with the screws, the hardware, they have done a nice job. Now, the hardware is recessed very deep. However, I believe that's because you end up with that double liner. So if it was a single liner, I would say that's too deep, but the fact that you have almost like a triple laminated between the white, the blue, and the red, that's why those end up so deep. A little bit of jimping over the top in terms of the spine. It's not really squared, but I would go as far as to say we'll probably be able to rip on a ferro rod. We'll do some testing with that to see. Typical drop point design, 50% saber grind down to that secondary bevel. The Skallywag logo etched in there, so you can see down on the secondary bevel, so you can see down there on the primary bevel. And if I'm not mistaken, this is hollow ground, which when you start at 1/8 of an inch for the stock thickness, and then you go to the hollow grind on a mid-height saber to that back edge of the secondary bevel, you're going to have a nice and slicey refined edge by the time you get to that cutting edge. So this should be a nice slicer, nice little camp companion, and a very simple blade to keep at your sides. Now, pair this up with a very basic Kydex. Not a lot to it, and in fact, it does not come with a belt loop, so you'll have to add your own. I would highly suggest an Ulti-Clip for a front pocket ride for this particular type of knife would work extremely well. Has plenty of retention. It's kind of like a friction fit, and Tour, and the way they've done it here on the Skallywag, leverages some leather strips that are going to be almost impossible to see on the inside of the sheath, but there are leather strips, which does a couple of things. Where this is a friction fit knife, it's real nice to be able to hold the knife in there easily. It will not scratch the finish, but more than anything, as you listen here, almost silent to insert that. So if you're somebody that wants to use this as a little hunting knife, it's actually kind of nice that it's not going to make a lot of noise as you get the knife in and out of that sheath. So again, very simple, yet effective at the same time. Now, if you go back to my Tour Knives Allied Brawler review, one of my biggest criticisms, and I hold true to this, is how square the handle slabs are. Just really square, and I don't mean cut you sharp, but they're definitely sharp, and they have sharp angles. And the Fireside Pro, and if you think about it, right, let's just go back to the name of the knife and the name of the knife alone, Fireside. You should be using this for food prep, but you should be using this for fire prep. If you're not prepping your fire by carving little curls and, splitting down some kindling and getting your tinder ready, you're not going as far as you should with your companion fixed blades. And this should be able to do a fantastic job. But what that means is you're going to have a lot of handle time. And what that means is that can introduce hot spots. And when you leave hard square edges, that can really damage your hands, especially over prolonged use. I don't care how tough your hands are, that's a sharp edge. So what would have made this a much better handle would be just rounding all of this out like they did on the Wanderer. If you look again at the Wanderer, very nicely rounded and contoured. And you can do that with machining. It doesn't need to be hand finished. So to keep the cost reasonable, just go with a machine finish, but finish off those edges and round them out. And if anything, it would be cool because it would expose some of the red and the blue on the profile of the knife. Would have given it a real neat look, and it would have made it way more comfortable in the hands, especially after prolonged use. Now, of course, testing will prevail, and we'll see how this does once I get it out in the field. A full 4-fingered grip, so that's nice. You can see here as we index in the hands, so that's going to fill out your hands just fine. So you can see the subtle jimping there, and your thumb rests exactly where it needs to, so that works out well. That full 4-fingered grip, and if you had to and wanted a little more length, you could certainly introduce a lanyard there with that lanyard hole, so that's easy. There's a lot going for this. You could flip the knife around, reverse grip. You have a guard, so your pinky resting into that guard, and the ability to put your thumb over the top. Now that's rounded nicely. That's not going to beat you up. So you can put your thumb over the top, get down through, twist and pop, split off some kindling, split off some tinder, and do a bunch of work. So the Fireside Pro definitely has a lot going for it. I just think there's a couple things that were a little bit of a miss. Weighing in at around 3 ounces, a very light, small little knife. HRC of 59 on the steel. Again, I can't tell necessarily whether or not this is 440C or 420 stainless. I'm not too sure. Now, Skallywag reporting the overall blade length at 2.75 inches, total length at 7 inches, the handle length 4.25 inches. But just for some clarification here, just measuring on my own, 2.75 for the cutting edge, so I agree there. And then in terms of the handle length, well, we'll get that right on the mark. 1, 2, 3, maybe 3.75 inches on the handle length. So I'm not sure where they're getting 4 1/4, so the measurements are just a little bit off there, at least in terms of the way that I measure a handle. But all in all, the Fireside Pro, pretty cool. And so whether you're looking for a small camp companion, the Fireside Pro, or a little bit more towards that belt knife with the Wanderer, definitely has a fairly nice lineup. They got a lot of cool stuff. I like a lot of their designs. Some of them are a little bit out there for me and for my needs, but I do like them. They have folders. Obviously at this point you see different manufacturers. So, some manufacturing from Tour, some from other OEM makers, and I'm looking forward to putting these to use. So if you like what you see here, do me a favor, look in the description box below. I'll have links that you can go to whenever possible. I put affiliate links whenever possible. I put discount codes. So take a look below. And yeah, I think these knives are pretty cool. So thank you guys. I appreciate you following along. Take a look at the rest of my Outer Limitless family of channels. Outer Limitless 2, which is my tactical and firearms side of things. My primary Outer Limitless channel, which covers outdoor hiking, camping, and backpacking gear, EDC gear, things like that. And Outer Limitless Lights, which covers all my EDC lights, headlamps, indoor, outdoor lighting, you name it. That's the Outer Limitless family of channels. So all right, guys, thanks for stopping by. Take care now. I'll see you soon.